So, moving right along, I want to talk now about how to raise super kids and then end with perhaps the most important session of the seminar. We say here that raising children today is very difficult, but it is the greatest responsibility that we have. It's the one responsibility that lasts beyond us into the decades ahead. Everything else will come and go, but our children will not. And that's why we say that all of life is the study of attention. And what you pay attention to is what you most value. And so you'll find that the very best parents are the ones that pay the most attention to their children. So how do we raise super kids? We say the key roles of parenting are to nurture your children and to build high self-esteem in them. And the organizing principle of parenting requires that you continually ask, does this build self-esteem in my child? One of the things that Barbara and I did when our children were young is we told them that you are a very special person and you come from God. And God has sent you to us as a gift. We don't own you, you own yourself. But God has sent you to us as a gift to take care of until you grow up. And we told each of our children that when they were young, and they go, wow, I mean, I came from God. They didn't even know what God was. But that is the way we've treated our children, as though they were gifts. Khalil Gibran in The Prophet says, your children come from you, but are not of you. They are like flaming arrows fired from your bow of life into the future. And who they are, you cannot control, and where they go, you will never be able to visit. If you ever read that in Khalil Gibran, it's a beautiful little 1 or 2 pages on children, but that's formed our philosophy as well. We don't own our children. We tell them that. We don't own you. If you make mistakes, I mean, you own yourself. And when you have daughters, and we have 2 beautiful daughters, we told them the same thing. You own yourself, so you take good care of yourself, and they always did. And if you understand what I mean as a father, they were always very smart about themselves. They say, hey, wait a minute, I own my body. I am not going to mess around or have anybody else. I think I'll go on now. But that is your major role, is to build self-esteem in your children. If you do that, you have been an effective parent. And if you don't do that, really everything else is secondary. Unfortunately, as we know, most adults spend the next 50 years getting over the first 5. And many people never get over it at all. Maslow's work concluded that probably 98% of adults never really do recover from mistakes that parents make when they are young. The criticism, the lack of attention, the condemnation, the complaining, and so on. They just never really get over them because there's no courses, no really good courses on parenting. And many parents think, oh, I'll just do what comes naturally, which means by the law of inertia, you will do to your children what your parents did to you and what their parents did to them. It'll be carried on down the generations. So we say 3, some thoughts to remember in building a child's self-esteem. Number 1, never use destructive criticism on your child. Never destructively criticize your child. We absolutely refuse to do that. If there's something that we disagree with, or they make a mistake or something else, we discuss it. And one of the things we've always done is we've always treated our children like adults. Even when they're 3 years old, we talk to them like adults, and we explain things to them, and we ask for their opinion, and we never baby talk. But we never use destructive criticism because destructive criticism leaves scars that last for life. And we knew that going in. I had so much criticism when I was growing up. Barbara, I don't think as much, but I had so much criticism that I actually thanked my parents. I thanked my parents because I made a decision that I would not do to my children what they did to me. And so I broke the cycle of the generations, and I did the opposite. So never use destructive criticism on your children. Number 2 is lack of love is the major reason for psychological, physical, and emotional problems in life. In fact, there's lots of studies that show that children who do not have love and touching in their earlier years fail to thrive. In other words, they don't grow. They don't grow as fast as others. They're actually shorter and smaller than their peers because they're not getting enough love. And there's a great story of a little boy. He was about 3, 4 years old. And his parents went out for dinner and were killed in a car crash. He's a single child, only child in the family. And the next thing he knew, all these strangers came in and they took him away and they processed him through the social welfare system. I guess it wasn't a family to take care of him. And they put him into foster care. And they put him in foster care, and he's one of 16 kids in a foster care family where they got multiple bunk beds and so on. And he got no attention and no affection at all. And 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, he was depressed, he was angry, threw tantrums, he acted out, he did all kinds of things. He fought with the other kids, and he got sent from foster home to foster home. They said, we can't take him. He went through foster homes until he was about 8 years old. And when he was 8 years old, a couple visited the foster home and looking for a child to adopt. And they saw him, and he was an angry little kid, but something about him really attracted them. So they took him home, and they began to smother him with love. They talked to him, and they listened to him, and they cared for him, and they took him for walks. And at a certain point, he started to realize he was safe again. For the first time, he was safe again. And he started to grow. He hadn't grown since he was 3 to 4 years old. Within the next 6 months, he grew 5 years. It was the most amazing thing. As he began to get this love, like water, like rain and sunshine on a flower, he just began to flower. And he became a beautiful young man, a beautiful little boy. And it's just an example of many of the examples in the literature of this failure to thrive through lack of love. The rule is, and I've said this before, is you cannot give a child too much love in their formative years. You can't give them too much love. And you can never give them too much love, but in their formative years, you can never give them too much. So don't worry about it. Some people say, well, you don't want to turn them into sissies. There's no immediate danger. Number 3, children need a continuous flow of love and approval from their parents. The love and approval is like oxygen to a person in an oxygen tent. They need a steady flow, and they have to know that it will come without interruptions. When my little girl, Christina, was in her first 10 years, I would always ask her, how much does Daddy love you? And she would say, this much. I trained my kids to, and I said, but what about when you break a dish, or what about when you don't listen to your parents? She said, Daddy, you always love me this much. And I've had many parents who've taken that and played it with their kids. It's called the love game. How much does Daddy love you? He loves you this much. Daddy, you always love me this much. And that's why I train my kids, is we always love you 100%. There's never going to be a 99% day in your life. It's 100%, totally. And it's so relieving for children to know that they're completely safe. The most important people in their life think that they are wonderful human beings and love them 100% unconditionally. So it's really important. Number 4, children need praise, and they need encouragement, and they need reinforcement, and they need patience and loving kindness and caring. They need all of these things, and they need them in a steady, steady flow. And remember, maybe people think my job is to get them off to school. No, your job is to raise them with high self-esteem. And everything has to be based on that, high self-esteem. And then when you praise them, you make them feel important. When you encourage them, you make them feel important and valuable. When you practice patience with them. And there's a wonderful little poem that said children learn what they experience. And if you raise a child with love, they grow up with love. If you raise a child with kindness, they grow up to be kind. If you raise a child with patience, they grow up to be patient, and so on. If you raise them with anger, they grow up to be angry. If you raise them with criticism, they grow up to be critical. If you raise them with punishment, they grow up to punish other people. So it's a really good thing. The apple never falls far from the tree. So we say, tell them you love them every day. Tell them you love them every day. And there's 5 ways, 5 behaviors you can use. When I was traveling, I'd phone home, and I'd tell Barbara, I'd say, let me speak to Christina. I'd say, hello, Christina. How are you? She's a little girl, 3 or 4 years old. I say, Daddy loves you. I love you. Hope you're having a good day. And she'd say, yes, Daddy, I love you too. And then finally, reached the point where I'd call Barbara, and Barbara would say, Christina, Daddy wants to talk to you. She says, tell him I love him too. I know what he's going to say. He's just going to tell me he loves me. All right, you know. And so you cannot do it too often. So number 1, give them unconditional love. See, love that is given, taken away, screws up a kid for life. Is if they never know when they're going to get it, when they're okay, when they're safe. It's interesting. You look at Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton, by all accounts, is a very charming man. I know people who are very dyed-in-the-wool conservative Republicans who have met Clinton and come away saying, geez, he's charming. And the reason he's charming is because he has alcoholic child syndrome, which is not a secret, is when he was growing up, his father was a violent drunk. What do we call them? Pardon? Yeah, no, he didn't have fetal alcohol syndrome. He was raised by an alcoholic father. And the alcoholic father would sit there, and then without any prediction at all, he would explode and go and running across the room and smack the kids. So this is what happens in many cases. So children who are raised in homes like this, there's been so many of them, they've studied them, they learn to be very, very charming, very socially adept. They're always alert, and they're very, very good at soothing people and getting their father to calm down and so he doesn't hit them. And what happens when they grow up, they're often very charming. They have a wonderful sense of anticipation for working with people. And why? Is because the love is unconditional. It traumatizes the child. They never know, are they going to be loved or are they going to be hit? Are they going to be loved? They're going to be ignored or cursed or shouted at or so on. So it has to be unconditional. And what you do is just make that decision. My love for my children is unconditional. It's not negotiable. There's nothing that they can do that will cause me to love them less than 100%. And number two is make eye contact. Eye contact is a very powerful way of telling your children that you love them. You might want to make a note of this. If you have children, there's a man named Dr. Ross Campbell, and he wrote 2 books which are the great classics. One is How to Really Love Your Child, and the second is How to Really Love Your Teenager. And the books are available on Amazon. And these books are absolutely wonderful books. They just had a major effect on Barbara and I raising our children, because he said that children need continual emotional sustenance. They need oxygen and they need love. And so therefore there are ways that you give them this mainlining of love so that they're constantly feeling loved and secure. And one is with eye contact, with what we call loving eye contact. And when you are in love with a person for the first time, you just people gaze into each other's eyes when they're in love. With your child, what you do is you just look into your child's eyes and you smile and you just look at them like that. If you ever tried this with a child, especially an infant will go like this. They get so excited when their mother or father looks at them in the eye and smiles. It just gets them all excited because they feel so happy inside. And growing children, even adults, respond very well to this, as we talked about before. Number 3 is give lots of physical contact. Hug them, hold them, pat them, stroke them, hold them in your arms, especially in their formative years. We mentioned earlier that one of the reasons that children cry at night when they're infants is to find out if they're safe. And one of the things you do is you go and pick them up and hold them and talk to them and rock them, and now they know they're safe and then go back to sleep again. So give them lots of physical contact. And you'll find that when you give them lots of physical contact, they grow up very, very strong. They grow up very, very confident in themselves. And my boys and I still hug each other. And we never, my daughters as well, but my boys and I just get along so wonderfully well because I've loved them and hugged them ever since they were small. Number 4 is give them focused attention. And focused attention is where you spend long, unbroken times with them, whether it's in drives or going for walks or going to movies or sitting together when you're traveling or sitting with them at home. Focused attention where there's no other disturbance. One of my rules, and I learned this, I had a woman who was a friend who was, her name was Diane, and she was a mess. She just went through a couple of marriages and she was always insecure and unhappy. And she said when she was young, she would go to her mother, and her mother, who loved to read, and obviously wasn't into parenting, her mother would say, "Go away, I'm reading. Go away, I'm reading." And if she kept coming, she would smack her and say, "Go away, I'm reading." And it developed within her a profound insecurity that she still had when she was 35 years old. So one of the things, I learned that, one of the things that I do is if one of my children come to me, now they're all grown up, I stop everything. If I'm watching television, which isn't that often, I stop it. If I'm working, I stop it. If I'm reading, I stop it. If I'm reading something, I close it up, put it down, put it away. I don't sit there and try to read it in my lap, you know. As I make it clear, there's nothing more important than you when you're here. And the same thing with Barbara, is I will stop everything that I'm doing for a member of my family because I know what's important, and what's important is focused attention. And there's nothing more insulting than unfocused attention. There's nothing more insulting than talking to a person or be talking to someone else and on the phone and making notes and reading the paper and watching television. So when our kids come over, we turn off the television. We never have the television on during dinner. Never, 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 never. When you sit down for dinner, you can have music if you like. Best is classical. If it's rock and roll, you'll sing along, mentally. So just put classical music, no television. When you're sitting at the table, everybody should be looking at each other. There's an interesting study that said the number of times that a family has dinner together or breakfast together or lunch together has an enormous impact on the evolution of the child's psyche and mentality and on their formation of a family. We used to always insist on family dinner. Whenever what happened, every Friday or Sunday night we'd have family dinner. And our kids would say, oh, they want to go out, and they want to go here, and they want to go there. I said, no, you're going to be here for family dinner, or no allowance. I said there. Once they sat down, they'd be fine. Everybody would be talking and everything else. Now time has passed, they've grown up, and they're adamant about family dinner. We have family dinner. My daughter's married, my son's married, my other son is married, and boy, they're adamant about family dinner, either with themselves or coming to our home. And it's because the love and the communication and the openness that goes around that dinner table when you're eating together is really wonderful. A little wine doesn't hurt either. Number 5, give them continuous praise and approval. Be continually building them up. Be continually telling them how good they are. Because they are. They're the most important people in your life. I remember watching television with Christina, and there was a ransom, and the family was being asked to give $1 million to get the little girl back who had been kidnapped. And Christina asked me, Daddy, if somebody kidnapped me, would you pay $1 million to get me back? And I said, of course I would. Would you pay $2 million? I said, sure. Would you give this house? And I said, yes, I would give anything. I would give anything to get you back if something happened to you. There's no limit. And then after that, she said, oh, that's good. And she went back to watching the movie. She just filed it away. And then afterwards I was thinking, what if someone had taken my child and instead of demanding ransom for the child, they said, if you don't give us $1 million, we'll cut off her finger. But just think about that. How long would it take you to decide to give them $1 million to stop them from cutting off her finger? Instantly. There's no question about that. Just cut off the end of the finger, the last knuckle. I mean, you would pay anything in the world to protect your children, to make sure that nothing happened to your children. And then you come home, watch television, and ignore them. Treat them like pets, scratch them behind the ears, send them down to their kennel, bedroom, to play video games. And people say, no, I would never do. I would pay anything to stop one knuckle being cut off by a kidnapper, but you don't even spend time with them when you're at home with them, when you've got them for those moments. Something to think about, just priorities. So we say the best determinants of peak performance, and there's been several studies done on this. There's 2 factors that take place in a house that raises kids that become high achievers by the time they're 18. And they've tracked this all the way back, and they see kids that become heads of the glee club, and they get or student body president, and they go out, they get jobs, they get onto teams, they go to good universities, they're highly self-responsible. 2 factors in child raising. Number 1 is a democratic environment. A democratic environment is an environment where the child is expected to contribute their opinions at an early age. That means they're not told what to do, their opinion is invited. Now we, with our kids, would always take them out, McDonald's or somewhere for dinner. So we'd always let them choose. We'd say, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? Someone would say McDonald's, someone would say Rubio's or something else. So whatever they choose, that would be where we would go. And we taught them this, not because of the food, but we wanted them to know that their opinion is important, and everybody in the family does what they decide to do. Our children are all leaders, in my estimate. They all see themselves as their opinions are important, and they're very, sometimes, outspoken with their opinions. But they are very confident in their opinions, and they're very confident saying what they believe. There's no wussies in our family. Because why? Because they've been led to believe that their opinions are important. They will come in when we're having parties with business people, and they'll come in, they'll talk. When they were young, they come in, they talk to them just like equals. They've always seen themselves as equals of adults because they've always been treated as equals of adults. The second factor is positive expectations. Positive expectations is that parents raise their children always expecting them to do well. Now here's an important point, because I had this discussion many times. People say, well, I have positive expectations of my kids. I insist that they get A's or they lose their car and their privileges. What's the problem with this? Well, it's not positive expectations that you have, it's positive demands. I demand that you do well, or I will withdraw my love and your privileges. And do you think this helps kids? I remember a story of a really interesting story. The guy's 35 years old, married, working at a company, nice social circle. He's at a party with friends and other couples, and there's a piano in the main room. And he sits down at the piano while the others are talking and getting drinks. He sits down at the piano and he opens it up, and he starts to stroke the keys, and then he begins to play. And he begins to play Chopin. Na, 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 beautiful, beautiful. And his wife goes, and all the other people go, oh, he's never played piano in all their lives. They've never seen him play a piano. Couldn't believe it. They said, it's beautiful, beautiful. Well, he said, yes, I took piano lessons for about 15 years. My parents made me take them from the age of 5 to the age of about 18 when I left home. They made me practice every single day. And I got right up to the point of his junior concert pianist. As a junior pianist, he said, when I left home, I never touched a piano again for the rest of my life. He said, I hated it because they always demanded that I practice. And so positive demands are very different from positive expectations. Positive demands suggest that if you don't do it, you're going to have love withdrawn. And positive expectations are, I know you can do it. I know you can do it. Parents frequently say, I believe in you. I believe you can do it. Get a bad grade? Hey, you get a better grade next time. Good grief. As long as you don't get grades as bad as I did when I was in school, we'll all be fine. And so the parents of the kids always know that their parents believe in them, 100%. I've always told my children they're going to be very successful when they grow up. I remember when Christina was born, and she was a little baby, I'd say, Christina, you're going to be a big success when you grow up. You're going to be a big success when you grow up. You're going to be a big success when you grow up. You're going to be a big success when you grow up. You're going to be a big success when you grow up. Every one of my children is hardwired for success. Every one of them will be great successes. They cannot conceive of it being otherwise. They say they're basically successes looking for a place to happen. So early on, teach your children to say, I like myself. I like myself. Tell them to say, I like myself. Now, when you're upset, say, I like myself. You just got a bad grade, say, I like myself. You're feeling angry, irritable, just say, I like myself. And kids are so suggestive that when they say it, they just smile. They can't stop. They can't say it and not smile. Most wonderful thing, because when you teach them to say, I like myself, then they become their own self-generating machines when they leave home. They know how to talk to themselves, how to think about themselves, how to set goals, and they just become positive, high self-esteem young people. So what can you do if you have made mistakes in raising your children? This is one of the most interesting breakthroughs, and someone was asking about this earlier, is what if you have raised them with destructive criticism, and as a result, they've lost their enthusiasm for life, they get lousy grades, they're problem kids. We've worked with parents who have been in counseling for 2 or 3 years because they have a totally dysfunctional family. They've got to go once a week, ordered by the court, to professional counseling because their kids are in so much trouble in school. Totally dysfunctional, and they didn't even understand what it was because when they were not in counseling, the parents were destructively criticizing and emotionally beating up their kids all the time to straighten up and fly right. And they couldn't understand why it wasn't working. So here's what you do. If you've made mistakes, if you've criticized your children, you gather your children around you and you sit them down and you say, I want to apologize to you for anything that I've ever done or said that's hurt you in the past. I want you to know that I'm sorry, and I want you to forgive me. Will you forgive me for everything and anything I ever did that hurt you in the past? And it takes an enormous amount of courage to do this, but when you do it, it takes the burden of guilt and worthlessness and anger and frustration off the child's back. Just like cutting off a pack, it just falls away. And we've had people who've been in counseling, as I say, for years. The couple, the husband and wife, went home and sat down with the kids and did this and promised never to do it again. They did this and they called us the next day. They said it transformed our children. Sometimes children will break into tears. Sometimes they'll get up and leave the room because they're so emotionally overwhelmed by their parents who've been beating up on them all this time, apologizing and asking for forgiveness. Now, the fourth point is give them permission to remind you when you forget. With my kids, sometimes I'll come home and I've been flying and traveling, I'm tired and irritable, and I would snap at them. I ain't perfect. I would snap at them or shout at them or something else, and always go to them immediately afterwards and say, I'm sorry, I shouted at you. I apologize. I should not have shouted at you. No matter what you did, I'm the grown-up, you're the child. Will you forgive me? And they always said, yes, I will forgive you. And then it's gone. Because I want to take that guilt away immediately so that they don't go walk around with it or go to sleep with it. I take it away immediately. If ever I shout at my kids, I go and ask for their forgiveness and apologize. And when you do that, when you sit them down and then you promise never to do it again, I will never do it again, and if I ever say an unkind word to you again, you have my permission to remind me so that I don't forget, not to remember, whatever. So if you'll do this, just gather the kids, sit them down, apologize for everything you ever said or did that hurt them in any way, and promise never to do it again. And what will happen is very often they will go through a transformation. The stories of the number of transformations, even teenagers, 16, 17, 18 years old, even adults, 25-year-old children, the father will call them. Usually it's the father, but often the father and mother will call them, have them come over or go and sit down with them and apologize and ask for their forgiveness. And suddenly the relationship between the two transforms. The whole burden of guilt is gone. The young person starts to flower. It's the most amazing thing that can happen. And the worst downside of this method is that it doesn't work. That's the worst downside, but the upside is life-changing. And the stories of young people whose lives have been changed by their parents apologizing to them and asking for their forgiveness just go on and on and on. In fact, I've never heard of a situation where it did not bring about the whole family coming back together again, love coming back into the family, kids excited and happy about life. Everything changes and transforms. So make it a game to abolish destructive criticism from your family life. So you never, never, never use it again. And Barbara and I are very clear about this. We will not allow destructive criticism in our house. We will not allow anybody in our house who uses destructive criticism. We don't allow our kids to criticize each other. And if they do, we stop them. We don't allow destructive criticism. It is just like a poisonous gas that destroys the emotions and the personality of people. So we just won't allow them to do it. And so those are the ideas on how to raise super kids. Remember, it takes courage and character to apologize. It takes tremendous courage and character because everybody is very self-righteous. You know that self-righteousness greases the slide to hell, both emotional hell, personal hell. Self-righteousness is a form of personal justification. Oh, I'm entitled because the kid did this or the kid didn't do that. I'll tell you a quick story. When you lead by example, you build courage and character in your children. I'll tell you a quick story because he's not here, so I can tell it. I have a son, Michael, who's 28, fine young man. And when he was 17, I was going on a trip to Europe. And I said to Michael, and Michael didn't have a car at that time. He didn't have good enough grades to get a car. If he was driving, he'd have to drive the van. I said to Michael, I said, I've got a fairly new Lexus. I said, Michael, I'm going to Europe for a week, and my car gets really, really lonely if it's left by itself. And I wonder if, you know, I don't mean to impose on you, I wonder if you'd just kind of take it out and drive it around on a daily basis, just so it doesn't feel bad. Would you do that for me? Well, he had a smile so big he could have eaten a banana sideways. I said, absolutely. So I gave him the car keys, went to the airport, flew off to Europe. And I'm in England, and I phoned home the following, maybe 2 days later. It's 11 o'clock at night in London, which is 7 o'clock in the morning in San Diego. I phone home, and I say, hi, Barbara, how's everything going? Da-da-da-da. She said, fine. You never want to hear the word fine pronounced like that on the phone when you're on the other side of the world. Well, everything's going fine. I said, what's up? She said, are you sitting down? You never want to hear that either. Are you sitting down? I said, yeah, sure. Okay, I'm sitting down. What's up? She said, well, Michael took your car out, and he wasn't used to it, and he came to a stop sign, and he stepped on the gas too hard. Instead of turning, he went straight off the road into an 8-foot, 10-foot ditch. And I said, what's the damage? I said, is Michael okay? Yes, he was wearing a seatbelt. I said, what's the damage? It's going to cost about $10,000 or $12,000. It was darn near marginal whether the car was repairable. It's going to cost about $10,000 or $12,000. I said, how is Michael? He said, Michael is shattered. He is just shattered. He's been walking around like a person who's just been sentenced to death. He's walking around, he's white-faced, and he's gone. And so I said, is he still there? He hasn't gone to school yet? He's still here. He said, put him on the phone. Because now I knew we had what was called a teaching moment, okay? Both for me and for Michael. So she said, no, he doesn't want to talk to you. I said, Barbara, you tell him that he has to speak to me. Put him on the phone. So you could hear him, Michael, come here. So Michael came, and he took the phone. I said, hello, Michael. And he said, hello. I said, Michael, I understand you wrecked my car. I said, yeah. I said, you drove it into a ditch? He said, yeah. I said, you know it's going to cost about $10,000 to fix it? Yeah. He said, I know that. I said, well, Michael, these things happen, and we will get past this, and life will go on. I want you to know that I love you, and I'm proud of you, and I think you're a wonderful young man, and you had a car crash, but boys are more important than cars. So it's okay. And I'll see you when I get back, okay? And he gave the phone back to Barbara. She said, I don't know what you said to him, but his whole face changed. He just lit up. He had this great smile. All this burden was taken off of his shoulders. And I knew that this was a teaching moment for me and for him. Because it's real easy to talk about, loving and hugging and caring and sharing with your kids, but when they wreck your car, and now it's choose-up time. Now you have to decide how you're going to behave, and it's then where you demonstrate the truth of how you feel about your children. And I told him, I love you, and I'm proud of you. I think you're a fine man, young man, and it's okay. We'll get past this, and life will go on. So you go off to school, and you have a good day. I still remember that, and Michael still remembers that, because that was the proof. That was like sort of the acid test of the relationship. The reason I tell you that story is not to entertain you so much as to realize is when your kids are least likely, least deserving of love because of their behavior that they most need your love. It's when they're most deserving of being punished of some kind that they most need your absolutely unconditional love and approval. That's when you really demonstrate what you're really made of and what your relationship is really made of. And if you'll do that just the one time, there was never again a crisis with our children that was not responded to in the same way. Whatever happens, we love you, we're proud of you, and this will pass. We will go on together. And we've had car wrecks, and we've had all kinds of things that have happened, and life does go on. One of the great questions is asked, what difference will this make in 10 years? And if in 10 years you will not even remember that it happened, then let it go. Just let it go. So that's how to raise super kids.